All right, everybody, good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us. I put in the chat, if the incessant beeping is enough to deter you from the live meeting, this meeting will be recorded and you can see it at a separate time after the lecture. We'll make sure we put that link out for the entire regimen as well. I'm happy to introduce our speaker in the second of the Community Affairs Committee talks for the Industry Hour. This is Glenn Rittereiser. In his short little intro, he's a cybersecurity officer at Maersk. So very relevant to the greater Merchant Marine Academy community. And he has been covering America, Europe, and the Africa regions in his 25 plus years of experience. I'll let him go into his other parts of his profile, his personal history, and then he has his Maersk slideshow that he is going to share with all of us. We will have a Q&A period at the end, but feel free to put anything in the chat as you see fit. And Glenn, you can take it from here. Thanks for having us.
Great, thanks, John. Thank you for having me. Pleasure to meet everybody. As John so nicely introduced, my name is Glenn Rittereiser. I am a cybersecurity officer for Maersk. I've been with Maersk for just a little over 6 years now. Have a lengthy history within U.S. government, basically every vertical you could possibly imagine. Spent some time in the transportation industry overseas in Germany. So pretty well rounded in the area, not only just within cybersecurity, but just technology in general. What I'm going to do today real quick is obviously talk a little bit about our non-Petya attack that hit Maersk in 2017. In order to show the presentation, I am going to jump off camera real quick because I've had some issues with my bandwidth today. Then once I'm finished with the session, I'll come back online. And as John had mentioned, we'll have some Q&As, ask some questions, things that you can. Just so that way you're aware, this is still a relevant topic with Maersk, as you've seen within the shipping industries today. It's a large target, which we can talk a little bit about during the Q&A. So there may be some things I can talk about, maybe some things I can't. So please don't let that deter any of your questions. I'll try and answer them as best as I can, because there still are some litigation lawsuits going on around this. And I just have to be careful about what I do put out there, especially since the session is being recorded. So if that's okay with everybody, I'll let me jump off screen here. Let me first share my screen to make sure everybody can see it. And then all right, can you guys see the presentation?
Yep.
All right, cool. All right, so let me stop the video here real quick, and let's keep our fingers crossed that we don't run into any types of concerns here. So again, as I mentioned, my name is Glenn Rittereiser. Today we're going to go over a webinar and talk a little bit about the Maersk non-Petya attack as a case study. And this is obviously going to be a case study for a major incident. Pretty soon, I would imagine you guys will be hearing some for COVID-19 as well. I would imagine those will probably come out within the next year or so, because that was probably a big incident for everyone as well. So non-Petya hit Maersk and 1,000 other companies on the 27th of June, 2017. For us and many others, this was a huge major incident. We just happened to be more open about it than what had occurred than most. To recap, non-Petya was a state-sponsored cyber attack in Ukraine, deliberately designed to destroy the ability to access or process data, but disguised as a ransomware. Although the Ukraine was a target of the attack, non-Petya was so virulent that it rapidly spread well beyond its intended target, therefore having a wide majority of collateral damage. Maersk is a global integrator of container logistics. We have a presence in 130 countries, and our IT is spread across 600 locations globally. We move around 1/5 of world trade and 1/4 of fresh food daily, fresh food globally. We operate over 700 ships, 78 ports and terminals, inland, road, rail, and shipping services, freight forwarding, and over 300 warehouses. So we're not just a shipping company, we're a pure logistics company. Our largest ships are as long as the Empire State Building, laid flat on its side, carrying 20,000 containers. At one time, we have to track 4 million containers around the world. And in June 2017, we lost all visibility to which container was heading where and for which customer. This is our corporate headquarters. It's based in Copenhagen, and this facility was taken down. We lost all IT, all phones, and all contacts within our mobile phones. Although 6 out of our 9 businesses in the group were able to continue with normal operations because they were on different IT networks, all 3 container-related businesses, Maersk Line, APM Terminals, and Damco Freight Forwarding, were shut down as a precautionary measure because they had global interfaces across businesses and partners. A corporate crisis management team convened and with a focus on containing the incident, ensuring business continuity and prioritization of recovery efforts. However, like many asset-rich or heavy industry companies, the business continuity approach was asset-centric, assuming that decision-making could be pushed to the experts at the edge. Our CTIO recognized that this would not work in this environment and moved us to a financially services approach to crisis management, which had a greater focus on centralized visibility and control. NotPetya itself was a new combination of different elements and malware that came together as a zero-day exploit. A zero-day exploit is a secret vulnerability for which no one has generated any protection, used typically by states to conduct cyber warfare. The release of NotPetya was designed to destabilize the Ukrainian government economically by affecting tax receipts. The timing of the attack was designated to strike the day before the Ukrainians' Constitutional Day, which is June 28th. This was to cause a maximum amount of political and economical damage during this time. Ukrainian organizations were the primary target, with banks, government ministries, newspapers, and energy firms all badly impacted. At the time, 95% of all companies operating in Ukraine use a software company called Medoc. This software is regularly updated, usually about every 4 to 6 weeks. Unfortunately, a software developer for Medoc was compromised, and a backdoor was created into Medoc around April of 2017. This backdoor was then used to pull the NotPetya malware into the victim systems, part of a routine software update in June of 2017. Our independent forensic analysis confirmed that at Maersk Ground Zero, the available window updates and all security patches were installed. A working antivirus was also running. However, the zero-day nature of the exploit overcame this. It spread rapidly, both vertically and horizontally, across the company and activated its payload 1 hour later. The only devices to escape the infection were those that were kept offline or not connected to the network at the time. The infection rate of all online devices was 100%. This means at Maersk, we lost 55,000 devices globally, including 6,000 servers, in around 17 minutes. The damage was so extensive that no data had been stolen, but access to the data was destroyed, including any ability to re-index for backups. Moreover, because NotPetya was a zero-day exploit, the CTIO knew that he would be able to that no help would in the form of operating system patches would come until day 9 or day 10. He therefore took the decision to reverse engineer the virus and securely build the company's digital services from bare metal. During the crisis, a transparent approach was taken, allowing us to inform and gain support from customers, partners, national authorities, and investors. Statements and customer advisories were shared daily in the first week, and senior management members participated in interviews providing updates on the situation. In total, Maersk Line sent out 20 customer advisories to their database of over 1,500 customers by contacts. Out of 15 advisories were in the first 2 weeks. The technical recovery plan started on June 28th, together with key IT partners and global cybersecurity agencies. By the following day, Maersk Line was able to accept bookings from customers with existing accounts. Employees were called in from holidays and from other offices across the globe, not just within IT, but within the business across all brands. There are around 9,000 people working 20-hour days to overcome the disruption. We used Deloitte to assist with cyber forensics in order to reverse engineer the virus, to understand how it worked, and we had over 200 other consultants that were flown in overnight from IBM, McAfee, and Microsoft to assist with our recovery. More normalized operations for Maersk Line, Damco, and APM terminals began during the week of July 3rd to July 9th. But it took about 2 weeks to rebuild all of our global applications and another 2 weeks after that to finish rebuilding all of our laptops. Mainly this was because purchasing 19,000 laptops at one time was a little bit hard to come by. So we had to work directly with the vendors to meet that need. In all, the first 90 days were spent recovering and moving into a new risk-based position so that we could then undertake a more deliberate recovery phase in preparation for funding of a 3-year program of additional investment in cybersecurity of over $200 million. The Q2 report for that year for the Transport and Logistics Division estimated in Q3 as a negative impact of $200 to $300 million from the attack. Due to the temporary loss of revenue, primarily the Maersk line and extraordinary cost to operations, as well as the investments in IT. Later estimates were as high as $350 million, but this is a little too difficult to quantify. The reality is that bookings were accepted from customers a day after the attack, and 95% of those 4 million containers in transit got to the right destination safely. But this involved a retrospective approach to customers' clearance that was only possible because our openness encouraged national authorities to trust us. This trust extended to customers who lent a skilled IT staff in a period where many companies were hit and cybersecurity experts became a rare commodity. You'll probably recognize this view taken atop of a building. This is the last thing a CISO sees after a major incident attack. There are 4 things that really helped Maersk overcome this extinct level of threat to our business. The first was crisis management culture that comes from shipping as a business. The second was the ability to draw on expertise from vendors, suppliers, customers, and national authorities brought about by our trust by being so transparent. The third was human resilience. You live and die by your hires and their ability to endure strategic shock and get back to the fight. Fourth was an element of good luck to balance the bad. In line with best practices, at the time, we had 147 online backups of our network distributed around the world. 146 were destroyed. The hard drive that was from a server was sitting in Lagos that was taken offline due to a power cut during the incident. We had that hard drive taken on a plane, flown from Nigeria, and was a seed from which we were able to rebuild our entire global network running off of a laptop. So the lessons for managing your reputation are simple. 1, you need to be competent at crisis management if you're able to retain the reputation, but you also need to be humble. If it's a significant crisis, you are unlikely to have the skills in-house and in-house, and you need to be able to ask for help early. In areas of weakness, early and before and after the similar situation, snap up that resource. 2, you need to be transparent, not only with employees, but partners, vendors, customers, regulators, and government agencies if you want their help. You will be tempted to opt for secrecy to minimize potential future legal claims, but we live in an information age where secrecy is only ever temporary. 3, people matter. In a crisis, human resilience is a difference between success and failure. You will lose this if you lose confidence of your people. They need to see the alignment between company actions and company values. And finally, 4, respond to the nature of the problem you're dealing with. Is it simple? Is it complicated, complex, or chaotic? This determines the response. Best practice, critical analysis. Probe, sensor, respond, or act, sensor, respond. Accept that complexity problems are chaos and can only be tackled with clumsy solutions. So with that, I would like to, I'll break my screen sharing and open up my video for any type of questions that the team may have. I'm not sure if.
Glenn, I'll go ahead and ask the first question. This
Sure.
is John Melgard, the POC. I'm just gonna, a general one for the students at the Merchant Marine Academy in their time here don't have much in the sense of cybersecurity education.
Okay.
They are going into, as you know, the generic maritime field. What can they do while they're here to raise their awareness and be more situated when they get to a scenario like the one that you went through at Maersk to be more ready for this type of event?
Yeah, so great question. So there's a lot of different things that one can do. So in starting off, one of the things that we didn't mention here is obviously the key people that took part in this whole thing. It wasn't just cyber guys. It wasn't just the business. We're talking about those containers that are no longer tracked. We lost connectivity to our vessels. So having a base or a good foundation to build your cybersecurity on is going to determine as a lot of different things. You can start with the basics, a basic understanding, focusing a little bit on the operational technology side. There are a lot of different courses out there to begin. Again, I'm not sure where you guys stand in your curriculum. Is it just more of an introductory to cybersecurity from a risk approach, from from support or operating systems? What is the technical level that people are starting with? Because that's gonna determine how fast you go and how quick you go. To understand cyber, you should have a little bit of a computer background. You should know what some of the things are. And you building off of that foundation and understanding that will help you get the technical aspect of it. But the business aspect is going to be a huge piece that anybody brings in. You're in a very different situation right now to where even we at Maersk, we try and hire from wherever we can, where we have that shipping expertise. In our risk department, for example, we just hired somebody who actually used to work for the Merchant Marine. Because he has that shipping background, that vessel background. He can help us identify and document risks a lot easier and a lot better and more proactive than somebody who, say, myself, doesn't have that type of experience. So I definitely focus on learning a little bit more of the basic tactics, the basic understandings around computers, the industries, how they work, how they connect. And then focus on the different types of business and attacks that you can potentially see. What I would see is an entry-level certification. They have them with like CompTIA, and depending upon the avenue in cybersecurity or where you want it to go, a great foundation is to focus on a CISM, CISSP. Will launch that career. Is it more of a SOC analysis that does red team, blue team, the hacking? Is it more of somebody who's more document focused and procedural based? Is it more of a risk based approach? Or is it somebody who thinks a little bit different outside the box and looks more towards resiliency and disaster recovery and something like this?
Glenn, this is Tim McClellan. I have a question. You had a business continuity plan in place at the time, and it had certain effectiveness, and I'm sure you learned from it. What kinds of things did you put in place to improve your resiliency, and how does that? How do the ship and the port operators assist the company in being more resilient in this type of event?
Yeah, so some of the things that obviously there was a lot of lessons learned. Even being a global company, you think you have everything in place, and when it happens, you realize that needs to be changes made. Some of the things that we've done with that $200 million and upwards that I mentioned earlier is we have rebuilt our entire cybersecurity posture. Again, taking a risk-based approach, things that we put in from there, we treat things differently. Where before the business used to own the risk. Before where cyber used to own the risk, the business now owns it. We've put other things in place, obviously just securing the debt, going from there. But the main point here is, again, from the port captains and the vessels, from the vessel aspect, things that we put in place there is when people are coming on board, making sure that USB devices are scanned. We rely a lot on the captains and the staff when they're at sea. Work on different areas of the vessels for us to see what's going on, if systems are acting differently, and what is being done. If we know maintenance is being done within a specific system, from a route upgrade, server upgrade, things like that. There is equipment on those devices, on those vessels, that the captain at the end of the day, he has control over. He's the only one that has the administrative passwords. He's the only one that can upgrade stuff. He's our eyes and ears, or she is our eyes and ears on that vessel, and being able to tell us what's going on and what's going on from that standpoint. Did that answer your question, Tim? Okay.
Yes, thank you. If I could just ask a follow-up question.
Yeah.
When we spoke before, you talked about Maersk putting in place ISO 27001, which is cybersecurity standard. And we know that the vessel operators under ISM are required as of the beginning of 2021 to have in place ISM, within their ISM system, cybersecurity policies, procedures. Is there any indication that Maersk will be looking at spreading the compliance or conformance with the ISO 27001 across the fleet and the terminal operations?
Yeah, great question. So right now we are looking at doing 27001 within our vessels that are run by Maersk Line Limited, our government division. We are looking at how we can do it across all the other vessels. It's, you know, and any type of certification like that is obviously it's tough to get. So if we can focus on more of the smaller fleets first to see how that would impact, or what's the best process to go around from there. Not only do we have to worry about ISO 27001, but because we have, you know, the critical infrastructure, each country is requiring different types of certifications where ISO 27001 is irrelevant. They require, it could be some country or region or country specific requirements. So being able to meet all those requirements at one time is pretty tough. So the answer is yes, we're trying to look at that. We're focusing in on the aspects of that with the Maersk Line Limited. We are researching in a lot of our newer vessels because we have the newer technology that's there, and you know, with the firewalls, with the technology in place, that they're more secure. Doing those on the older vessels will be a lot harder because again, you have different controls, different policies, different standards. We've also taken the approach to step back a little bit, and our policies and standards across the organization are split into two. We have the business side, and we have what's known as the operational technology side, what we call the OT side. And our OT environment is not just vessels; it's our warehouses, it's our terminals. The reason why we have them separated out that way is because they have a very similar technology. So we do have our own sets of processes and standards around those, because those networks need to be set up much differently because of the older legacy technology, which are going to require more in-depth security protocols, more standards, more compliances, and more controls from that standpoint. So yes, we are starting to our first level was across the fleet with the policies and standards. Our ports also have, that we own or we have operational control over, do also have some policies and standards in place. The ISO 27001 and the other certifications are next on the list.
Okay, thank you.
Glenn, we had a question from the chat, one that just kind of a little more basic question. You talked about the nature of the attack as a 0-day. We're wondering if you could expand on that, talk a little bit about it, and if there's been any additional training for any Maersk applications for those at sea. Like the idea of the CO being solely responsible, something I'm identified with, rings true for my active duty Navy career. If there was more training to the afloat units about those types of 0 days, and if you could just talk a little bit about those for the group. Thanks.
Sure. So the 0-day is basically an attack that comes out that nobody has a fix for. So for example, you may have heard over the past couple of weeks of a thing called Log4j. It's a Java-based vulnerability that was found and uncovered, that 98% of all web servers that have Java installed have this vulnerability. There weren't any fixes for it from Java. It's taken at least 10 days to get something out. So anything that is known as a 0-day exploit or a 0-day vulnerability is just that. It's something that's been created and doesn't have a fix for it. So what type of training have we done? Obviously, we have revamped a lot of our training. Our awareness program hits all different levels. There's a base level of understanding from an awareness standpoint. You know, how do you recognize a phishing simulation versus an attack and things like that. We've also broken down to different areas. So our fleet teams have a much different awareness training because they're disconnected, and there's a little more requirements for while they are disconnected to be able to run and support some of these incidents. Some of the types of training include, and obviously, but not limited to, you know, we will do disaster recovery testing. We'll do tabletop testing. We've actually gone to the point to where we've done scenario-based testing. as to a vessel has been attacked. How do we recover? What do we need from what does the vessel need to come up to? We have our own vessel IT operations that controls communication going back to the vessels. So we will funnel everything. Our crisis management team will be spun up. We'll funnel a lot of the communications through them. A lot of these folks that work in the vessel IT team are ex-mariners because they understand the technology, they understand how it works, and they have a cyber background. And they're the eyes and ears, and because they know what the environment is like, it's a lot easier for them to talk to the folks on the vessel to see what's going on, what's acting differently, and what could be changed, and go from there. As far as skill-based sets, for what is done, the skills training is typically done obviously when they're back on land, and there's a lot of different things that they'll learn from the regular, again, as I mentioned, fishing simulations to actually seeing in the testing zones that we have our own training division to where they've actually taken some of the training simulations and they've infected the simulators to make it look like everything is an attack, even something very small. The depth changes from the water, or turning, trying to steer to the left and steer to the right. So it's not as much as you would see a cyber attack at home, but just weird things that start working up that will be the initial onset of a cyber attack. So it's a lot of soft skills training as well.
Thanks, Glenn.
Glenn, this is Ping Furlan.
Hi, Ping.
Thank you so much for taking time from your busy schedule to speak to us on this very important and timely topic. It really shows us how real these cyber attacks are in the real world of business and the devastating impacts they generate. I just have a question. I have been wondering since the last time we met, just the whole attack. How did you all get started? Is that because someone clicked on a phishing email or email of that nature? So to cause all this event?
Yes. So the way this got started was the MEDOC software. So the Ukraine, as I mentioned, only has one tax software. Everyone in the Ukraine has to use this tax software version, the MEDOCs. A developer from MEDOCs got hacked into through a phishing email. The hacker was then able to control the MEDOC software. And basically what happens is MEDOCs does an automatic update. So you as the end user don't go click update, and it pulls down the new version. It just pushes the version out. So basically what happened was once that software version got pushed out, they used a technique called the time bomb. The malware was then pushed out on as a regular update, was spread across the environment, and then it knew at what time it should basically explode. That's why they call it a time bomb. That's when it became active and wiped everything out from there. So as mentioned earlier, we were protected as well as we could. And again, because we have an office in the Ukraine that has to use that tax software because they're connected into the Maersk network, it was spread rapidly throughout it. So it wasn't anything that a Maersk individual had clicked on. We were simply collateral damage.
Thank you.
Glenn, this is Peter Kale. I have a question. When that attack started, did it affect other shipping companies that you're also using this tax software? I mean, or just how did it?
So you came in a little broken up there. I think I got your point as to where the other shipping companies that were impacted by this as well. I'm not aware of any other shipping companies that may have been impacted by this, but I am aware of other logistics companies, DHL, FedEx. I believe UPS was impacted by it as well. A lot of people necessarily didn't come out and come public with it because, again, it was the secrecy around. And a lot of people in the beginning thought we were crazy for going out and publicly saying, yes, we were hit by this and this is the impact. But it was a gamble that the leadership team took, and it was the right one because, again, having all these ships come in, and our whole logistical supply chain was basically back up and running within a day. We were able to move product and things like that. I do know there were other companies on the slides that were there, like I believe Merck. There was Mondelez, those companies took almost a year to recover. Just a huge impact all in all. But you mentioned, Peter, about just that attack. One of the things that looking back retrospectively is this area, this logistics and services, the vessels, the marine aspect of it has been heavily targeted over the last 5 years. Maersk was the first one to get hit. The big five within shipping have all had some type of a ransomware attack, have been taken offline, to include the toll group got hit twice. So it's no secret that cyber within the maritime industry is at its weakest level that it has ever been. And because there haven't been any regulations, any requirements, things like those, there really hasn't been, we're very reactive. Let it happen to us first, and then we'll deal with it from there. We haven't taken a proactive approach to it. That's starting to change now, as you and the students are saying. You're starting to develop the cybersecurity programs. You're trying to get them more aware of the things that are out there, the regulations, the requirements. These are key pieces that are being brought forward to this industry that will take it to the next level. Just look at the supply chain now. Supply chain is a disaster. You have things sitting out there, in off the port of California for months. And why is that? Again, my own personal opinion, you have larger vessels that are coming in carrying more cargo, but the cranes at the ports, there aren't enough to take them off of there. The ports were built for a certain size ship, that would come in and unload very easily with these cranes. The shipping companies have now added more technology, bigger ships, more fuel efficient, and they're taking longer in the ports to unload than they have before. So how does this all fit in there? Simple. When you have, and we've done this, we've actually performed penetration testing and basically attacked our own vessels sitting at port. It's very easy to do. Not that I want anybody to go do that, but just saying it's very easy for a malicious actor to have a drone, that can run a Linux software, which is a key software that is used for hacking, launch tools remotely from 3 to 5 kilometers away onto a vessel, and you have no idea where this is coming from. A vessel is a floating office. You have to build up that vessel with the same technology you'd have with an office on land. The difference is the office on land, you have IT personnel. In the vessel, you have the mariners. That's where you guys need to have that experience to be able to see things that look different, recognize the differences as what they're seeing. And the only way you can get that is by going through this type of training. And Peter, I know I kind of went off on a rant there and kind of took it a little bit more off course, but I think it was just kind of good to bring in there as to where this all fits in.
I think that is great. Do you have you changed your procedures on the vessel? Hey, who do I report to? Do I just report to the master and he reports to the best, the port captain, or is there a set reporting procedure for the folks on the vessel?
Yeah, so basically it's kind of like you'd almost have on land. You'd have your mariners, you have the team leader, you'd have the captain, and everyone kind of reports into the captain, and the captain will report into the head of the port captains. We call it the husbandry group, and they report into that. So again, there's a normal type of structure, whether it's on land or at sea, and it's the same process from there. Now, what have we done procedurally different on the vessels? We've done a lot. So what happens is, Coast Guard, you're pulling into port, somebody comes in, and now all of a sudden you have a USB drive that they say, hey, we need your manifest. Well, you plug it into your computer. You have no idea where this came from. It was on 2 or 3 other ships. You don't know if it's infected or anything like that. So now what we've done is in our newer vessels, we have a scanning station that basically, every device, when you plug that USB drive in, and it scans it for malware, things like that, before it even connects it to the system. So that's one of the first things we've done. On our older vessels, we've done the same thing, but with a standalone PC. So we just put it there. We have a software tool that runs and scans that. If there's a virus that's infected on it, it cleans it out. If it can't clean it out, they can't use it. They have to come back in with another one. Because again, how could you bring down the maritime industry is have something, you go into some of these third world countries that are corrupted with government. It's very easy to infect everybody and kind of go from there. So that's probably one of the biggest things that we've changed within our vessel strategy for now.
I'm curious how you rebuilt the system with a server from Lagos. Can you?
Yeah, so that's actually really interesting. So just a little more to that. So basically in Lagos, they had a power outage during the attack. Long story short, there was only one person in Africa, in the Lagos area, that had a visa to get to Copenhagen. That there was nobody that was able to get into the UK or anything like that. So they flew him into Copenhagen. All the rebuilds were taking place in London, outside of London. From that's where the IT teams were. And it was kind of like you'd see in a spy movie. They walked past each other. One dropped off the hard drive. One picked it up, circled around, and they hopped on a plane going over to Maidenhead, England. And that's where they rebuilt everything. I think that they rebuilt that. It was the entire Active Directory infrastructure that was on a USB drive. They loaded it up onto a laptop. I think it was a Dell, old Super Dell laptop that it was just crumbling on. I think they have some pictures of it somewhere, but it was just it was sitting there on top of a couple monitors with a couple network cables plugged into it. And they were just letting it replicate to rebuild it from there. So it was interesting.
Glenn, I've got one additional question. Taking the risk management approach and trying to learn from this event with respect to your fleet and your other operations, looking to try to reduce your vulnerabilities, to reduce your risk, but also to have a contingency plan to recover and in the short term and then in the long term. From a corporate perspective, which area provides the most challenge? Trying to sufficiently reduce your vulnerabilities or trying to develop a recovery and business continuity plan that's going to be effective?
Wow, good question. So I would go from the vulnerability aspect. The reason being is one of the things that we did after the cyber attack was we went out and we conducted BIAs, business impact analysis, on all of the applications that we've had. From that, we've been able to identify 19 critical applications that we need to bring the shipping business, for customers to be able to book, receive, that piece, bring them online sooner than we did before. So for example, when we talked about, the time it took for us to recover up to, I think it was like 4 or 5 days for the Active Directory, we can now recover Active Directory in less than 6 hours. So because we've identified the key applications, the key processes that we need, the business resiliency piece to be able to get the core applications back up and running within Maersk are pretty stable now. It's easy. I don't want to say it's easy to keep up with, but it's the easier of the two. As you move more towards a logistics integrated company and everything becomes more digital, which is a transformation that we've made, we've now increased our threat landscape out on the internet. We are the largest internet facing company in the world right now. So we have the most presence on the internet than Microsoft, than any of all these other companies do. A Maersk brand reputation from there. The vulnerability management on all of those devices and the end devices, your end user desktops, is difficult. So that's kind of where you balance the act. Cybersecurity, which is both good and bad, is back to being the #1 risk of the organization. And it's not because we can't secure it, it's because of how heavy it's become. Back in the day, if I say back in the day, like it was a long time ago, in 2017, when we were down for about an hour, we would lose $1 million an hour. We are now upwards of $2.7 to $3.25 million an hour that we lose of revenue if we're down for 1 hour. So networks are redesigned. You have that resiliency. We're moving a lot towards cloud strategy, multi-cloud strategy. My opinion is it's that vulnerability side. And I think, if there were 4 cybersecurity guys sitting next to each other, we'd all have a different answer. But I think for me, that in the state that we're in right now, it's that managing of that vulnerability environment, which is definitely the toughest. You can have all the tools you want, and it's something to say. There's a tool out there for everything. The one tool that there isn't is for that human being, that human interaction, that human sense of being able to identify something is not right. You can't leave that to a tool. You can't leave that to AI. You have to have that human knowledge.
Okay, thank you.
We have about 15 more minutes in our original allotted time for any more Q&A, if anybody has anything. Feel free to take advantage of this excellent chance to talk to somebody who's not just a system expert, but has gone through the ringer using that system knowledge for something that's applicable to all of our career fields. So feel free, we got about 15 more minutes.
I'm even trying to think of some trends or anything like that I can possibly bring up that might help some of the students. Are you guys doing a lot of training around the like around like ethical hacking, or how wide and how in depth does the program go from what you guys are doing today?
From my brief experience, we got some student feedback during the invitation emails that there is a cybersecurity club.
Okay.
I believe that that's more of a specialized club. It's more of like a extracurricular. I'm not quite sure how integrated cybersecurity education is with the day-to-day curriculum quite yet. I imagine it'll trickle down because it is the natural way things go. If anybody else has anything to add from a more direct experience, feel free.
Glenn, I'd say in the logistics and security courses, we're looking at from a management, and why I asked the question with respect to trying to manage risk and looking at vulnerabilities and then resiliency and business continuity.
Yep.
So that's the kind of the level we're looking at least in those courses.
Okay.
I suspect the Cyber Club is going a little bit more in the other direction, a little more in depth in the technical aspects of it.
We are in the process too of building, we're designing out a new laboratory for the library specifically for cyber and also for things like, digital printing and things like that. But I mean, the new computer laboratory to help support a lot of these things. But the Cyber Club has sort of spearheaded a lot of these things already. Give Kevin Clark a lot of credit for that one, especially. And we are moving in that direction and trying to incorporate more technology on campus and better laboratories over the next couple of years to sort of expand that program.
Okay, so some of the things that I'm starting to see, not just within this vertical, but within the industry itself. The industry is starting to become more agile, which is kind of scary when you think about it, because you think about, cyber is a very procedural, rigorous, even IT. That you have a lot of steps to doing certain things, but a lot of project management across the board is using agile methods. Developers down to actual business units. On how they bring on new business and things like that. So you'll see a lot of things called platforms. We use them at Merck. So we've taken certain areas and we've built platforms. And we use a term called, a couple different terms. It's called two in a box, to where you have a platform owner. Again, this is a lot of the agile and Scrum methodology. You have a platform owner, you have a cybersecurity engineer, and you have a engineer architect. And those three people work together within that platform to talk about how they're going to standardize things going across. It's a very, they'll set up Scrum calls that they'll do short turnaround times of any type of implementation fixes and things like that. A lot of the reason why I bring that up is because when you start to take the agile approach and you're using a risk-based approach, there's a different format that can be used for your risks and how they get remediated. It's a weighted scale. So just because it's the most important risk doesn't mean that it's going to get the most attention right off the bat. And then they try and resolve things based upon whether it's a revenue impact or there's an outage impact. There's a lot of metrics that go into place. That might be something as well that you guys may want to take a look at, just to kind of become familiar with it. It's a big thing out there. It's called, being Scrum Masters and things like that, but it's not necessarily knowing or having the certification, but just knowing the philosophy behind it will be key. And actually, we've started to deploy it here at Maersk, and for an old guy like me, it was kind of hard to adapt. But it's more in tune with some of the younger generations coming up through schools and things like that. So that's something to look at. Also, forensics is becoming huge. It's always been big. But now you see a lot of companies outsourcing things to third parties and managed service providers, having some type of a forensical background, whether it's on, mobile devices, iPads, desktops, getting some exposure to that, and that whole process and philosophy is very interesting, and it helps round out some skill sets. In cyber, again, own personal opinion. If you could be a jack of all trades, master of none, that means you have a very wide knowledge in the arena, in the area, and you're just not going to standardize on some expertise. Makes you more valuable, gives you a little more understanding as to what different groups are doing within cyber, or especially within companies that you go to, or even within Maersk, instead of being stuck in a single silo. We have a security operations team that is 375 people, and we have dedicated staff doing different things. So we'll have an endpoint analysis that runs one of our endpoint tools. That's all he does. And he wants to get over to do some type of a penetration testing or things like that. Not that he doesn't have the skill set, but he doesn't know that much about it, so he has to learn about it. So being able to come up with a plan that maybe will allow the students to almost know which path they want to go down within cyber. Is it more of a technical approach? Is it more of a risk type compliance area? Both of them have two different types of skill sets, but need to have somewhat of a similar knowledge or base understanding. Just might be something to take a look at as well.
Glenn, I've got another question. When we look at the NIST standards, one of the things they state is security is security. They don't differentiate cyber versus physical. Mm-hmm. They're looking at it as providing security, recognizing that it can come from other direction. Within Maersk, is that the philosophy you take, or do you have a separate groups that focus on physical security versus cyber security?
So we have two separate groups. Now we have what we call as our health, safety, and health, safety, security, and environment team. They focus on port security. They focus on physical security. They focus on office security, so OSHA regulations, things like that. They will also come back to the cyber team when it comes to like CCTVs and making sure that they're placed accordingly, or the technology that's being used behind that. But that is also a skill set that is used, that Maersk has decided to split up between the two, because it makes sense to be in those experts' hands. We help a lot around, not only just with the HSSC guys, but teams will come to us with, cyber is broken down to a lot of different areas. So one of the projects that we're working on now is integration of a new company. We'll help bring on a new company. We'll make sure they have the compliance and the standards, but our IT team and our integration team will work on building that design and what that's going to look like. Once that plan is done, it then comes to the cybersecurity team. One, to make sure that it's in compliance with our standards, but two, making sure that technically it will work and doesn't open up any additional vulnerabilities into Maersk through this new connection. And as I mentioned earlier on, this is where that broad expertise comes from. Being able to take nothing and create something of it, whether it be in a vessel environment or not, being able to have that expertise and that background helps you come back and say, well, why are you going to hook this up this way when it should be hooked up that way? Again, I have a warehousing background, was able to do it within warehousing space. We have a gentleman from our risk team that is very fluid with the vessels, has spent years on a vessel. He attacks that the same way. So that's his specific area. When anything happens on a vessel, He is the cybersecurity engineer that looks at that because he has that expertise. So again, in through cyber, the kind of message that we're trying to get across is any type of skill set that you can use, again, will come across great from a business perspective, and just building that foundation as to what you want to do. There's so many different ways within cyber to go. Being able to try and find that out earlier on in your career might be a little bit better.
All right, we've got time for probably about 1 or 2 more questions from Glenn. If anybody has any last words or alibis that they want to pass out, feel free. Now's your chance.
Hey, I got a question for the actual cyber attack that occurred. So you said it happened by they used a time bomb method.
Yep.
So did that hijack the antivirus protection, and then just whenever the update was pushed out, that's when just the attack commenced, or how did it happen?
Yeah. So great question. So basically, how the time bomb works is the malware was packaged up and put into this NEDOC software. The application saw it as a typical file, that it would normally pull down. When it got pulled down to the machines, it was unpacked. All right. So basically, it went from compressed to being uncompressed. Because it was a 0-day, our tooling out there across the globe wasn't able to determine if it was malicious or not. So it basically just spread out and went from there. And what it does, there's a mechanism that can be configured in malware that says, read the computer clock, and when it says this date and this time, spread. So what it did was it said, okay, it pushed it down to all the Ukrainian systems, and it said activate at this day and this time, spread yourself across the network. And what it does is it went out and it used credentials that it had found on the machine while it was in, we'll call it stealth mode, before it exploded, to pull down credentials from the memory for administrator accounts. So as it spread, it already had a list of, from that single machine, 5 to 10 different accounts that had administrator access that it could use on other accounts to be able to log in and activate the virus from there. Does that make sense? I mean, I can go in a little bit deeper if you like me to. I just want to make sure I answered your question properly.
I got the gist, sir. And MEDOC is your protection software, correct?
No, so MEDOC is actually the financial application, the tax application that is used within the Ukraine. Almost very similar to how we would use QuickBooks or something like that. It was just an application that they used.
Thank you, sir.
No, my pleasure.
Glenn, this is Kevin Clark. You touched on crisis management. In the United States, most of the shipping companies are training to FEMA's incident command system, so that the companies can work with different entities and government. Is there an international equivalent of that, or does Maersk use a hybrid of the ICS system?
So we use a little bit of a hybrid, but typically what we'll do is, I believe it's called, I want to say, is it BIMCO? BIMCO, I guess, is a maritime governing body. And we'll use their recommendations. We'll kind of pull a couple different things from there as frameworks to build upon what our crisis management plan would look like.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. I'm afraid that's the end of our allotted time. Should Glenn have any time after the talk, I'm sure we will see if he can stick around. But for now, we will conclude our talk. So I have one quick note that I'll try to share on the screen right now. Hopefully you can see this. We just have a little certificate of appreciation for Glenn. We'll be sending him a nice paper copy of this. He can put it on his wall behind him, and he can continue to grow his Zoom room prowess, put it on his trophy wall. And we really appreciate it, Glenn. Thank you for both the technical details, the managerial aspects, covers the entire breadth of our curriculum here at the Merchant Marine Academy. Some shout outs for the active duty Navy community, talking about leadership tenets of responsibility, accountability training at sea. I think it's relevant for everybody, and we really hope that this will be a valuable resource when we post it online that can be used for both curriculum development and for interested midshipmen at the technical and managerial levels. So we really appreciate it. There's no such thing as a Zoom round of applause, I don't think, but we should be applauding you, and we really appreciate your time. And if anybody has anything, feel free, stick around. But for now, we'll conclude. And thanks everybody for your participation and support of this effort.